So let's say you found a skeleton. How would you tell it's a dinosaur? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on that.
Hey there, everybody. I am Dapper Dinosaur. We're here for some Dapper Dinosaur reacts to things. I was originally going to have a guest, but that guest is currently dealing with some veterinarian problems. Well, veterinarian things that veterinarians can fix, not problems with veterinarians. You see what I mean? Basically, not very well pet. So, unless I get more word from my guest, we're just going to soldier on my own. I know, it's terrible. I don't even know why people watch. But anyway, so we're still reacting to a video called Geologic Bias versus the Witness of Fossils, in which a young Earth creationist attempts to tell me how much the geological record really comports very well with the flood of Noah. Very, very well. Now, I am trying some noise cancellation settings that I haven't been using before, so if they're terrible, let me know. If you don't notice anything, then I guess we'll just continue on. When we last left off, we were being told just how strongly correlated the geological column was with the idea of ecological zonation, which is the idea that as the floodwaters rise, the different biomes going farther from shore are what gets preserved. Of course, this ignores a whole lot of things, like the fact that we have land sediments from all throughout the geological column, including before the fossils. It also ignores the fact that, there's deep water and shallow water and stuff all throughout the top layers, which there probably shouldn't be. But actually, he's going to be talking about how there's waterborne fossils everywhere throughout the geological column, and why that's apparently a good thing for the flood. So he just said, sorry, that, oh yeah, we find marine fossils all throughout the flood, or all throughout the fossil record. So we'll see what happens. Here we go.
I'm trying to myself to argue from the fossil record that it's best interpreted by way of the global flood. And one of these powerful evidence for this is the fact that ocean fossils can be found everywhere, on the top of literally every mountain chain in the world.
Well, no, not at the top of every mountain chain. I mean, there are recent mountains that are poking up through mostly terrestrial sediments that don't actually have all that many marine fossils at the top. But I want to see what his argument is, because if his argument is just, well, it was underwater, so we get water fossils, there's going to be some problems there. Now, if his argument is the floodwater washed ocean creatures up, well, it would do that, but that also has some problems. So I'm not sure exactly where he's going to go here, but we're going to find out.
Except where mountains that have punched up through the sedimentary rocks, like your volcanic mountains, you can find ocean fossils. They're on the tops.
Okay, so he does know it's not all mountains, so that's fair enough.
So the Andes, the tops of the Alps, you climb up there and you can find ocean fossils. Clams are blooming everywhere.
True.
Well, the fact that ocean fossils are found on the tops of mountains is not the big deal, though, really, because mountains build. A floodplain can be lifted up and become a high-lifted plateau. Or
yes, it can. It's almost like this really isn't a problem for anything.
On the top of a mountain. So the fact that fossils are on the tops of mountains is not the big deal. They are found throughout the fossil record, literally in every single layer of the fossil
oceans since the beginning of life on Earth. So yeah, we find ocean sediment all over the place. Like, okay, true.
Marine fossils or ocean fossils. Unlike the idealized diagram in the fossil record, like the one I show you here, the real fossil record is comprised almost entirely of ocean fossils. 95% of all...
Okay, so I know where he's going with this one. It's 95% of all fossils are marine invertebrates, primarily shellfish, and then of the 5% remaining, 95% are like plants or whatever. And then of the 5% remaining, it goes down 95.5, 95.5 several times. Here's the thing. I was trying to find this, and I enlisted the help of R.J. Downard and Jackson Wheat, because if you've ever read The Rocks Were There, which is the book by R.J. Downard and Jackson Wheat, which I recommend, by the way, some statistical analysis done by a mathematician No, it's literally an offhanded estimate that Dwayne Gish gave at an ICR meeting, not even like a conference, just like hanging out with some guys. And he was like, "Oh yeah, sure. Everything must be, 95% this, 5% that." And Tommy Dragon has been a member at the tetrapod level for 4 months. Thank you very much. Am I getting? I'm not seeing buffer on my end. I don't know. I'm seeing a good connection. Sorry about that, guys. So, yeah, this whole claim is just something Dwayne Gish made up one day. He wasn't even claiming that it was some kind of hard fact. He was giving it in the context of like a rough estimate, kind of like, this seems about right to me. Are there drink triggers happening for this stream? Says Blizz Winters. Generally, no. I really only do those on Tuesdays, and most weeks it's also the only day of the week that I drink. Because, usually I end up having a fair bit to drink on Tuesdays.
Fossils are marine invertebrates, primarily shellfish. 95% of the remaining 5% are plants.
Yeah, this is exactly what I thought it was going to be.
95% of the rest are fish. Most of the rest are insects. The reality is that much less than 1% of the fossils in the fossil record are land vertebrates.
Okay, so like we said, these numbers are nonsense, but let's just accept them. Okay, I mean, when you think about like, okay, how many marine invertebrates are there in the fossil record? I don't, like, it's trillions upon trillions. Like, we're talking about, like, numbers in, like, the nonillions of fossils, right? Because if you think about it, every bit of limestone is almost entirely composed of marine invertebrate fossils. I mean, this is ridiculous. But given that we have, even if we accept these numbers, you got trillions upon trillions of marine invertebrates. Even if we accept these numbers, that still leaves you with billions of land vertebrates, so I don't see what the problem is. I just don't get what the point is, but sure, let's hear what the problem is.
It is clear that the fossil record was formed when the oceans inundated the terrestrial habitats, causing land and marine organisms to be buried together.
Okay, so a few things to unpack there. There's a difference between a flood and a marine transgression. So a flood is characteristically flowing or stagnant water where it is not usually found. So where it is not usually found means that if you go there over the course of, say, a year, it will almost never be there. Now, there can be regular flooding, like you have, say, in the Nile River Valley, where every year snows from the mountains to the south melt, flood the water, and then for a few weeks a year, there is flowing and sometimes stagnant water overflowing the banks of the Nile, where there normally is no such water. That's a regular, predictable flood. The same thing used to happen in the Tigris and Euphrates. Now various dams and whatnot have made that not so much a thing, but historically that was the case. That was why, like, the ancient Mesopotamians built cities there, is because the regular floods, or the irregular floods, I should say, while they were very destructive, also resulted in excellent farmland. Now, there are even less regular floods, right? So you can have things like, a big storm comes in and the storm surge washes over a big area, or an unusual amount of rain gets dumped in a place that normally just doesn't see flooding. So a marine transgression, though, is when the water of the ocean, because the ocean levels are higher, covers significant portions of the continental plate, which would otherwise be below water, if the water levels were lower. Inkboy sends a super sticker of, I believe, a fox for €2. Thank you very much, Inkboy. I really do appreciate it. So, marine transgression is a change in what is typical in an area. It's sort of like having a new river. If a new river is established in a new place, then maybe it starts with some kind of flooding type event, but now that's just the new thing that's there. Now there's a river. It's not unusual. Marine transgressions are relatively low energy. They don't result in significant amounts of turbidite. They are easily identifiable as causing the same kind of deposition and lithification that we see offshore today. Because remember, the continental shelves, which I'm sure you've heard of, basically are the current marine transgression. If somehow the oceans were to lower even more, that would just become new land. Sorry. And we know that's the case because we know of currently submerged land areas that people used to inhabit. So like the area to the east of Great Britain, all the way until you get to Scandinavia, used to be a human inhabited area. You can still find sunken forests, old or Neolithic campsites, hunting grounds, the remains of terrestrial organisms. This whole area is called Doggerland. Sorry. So, like, a marine transgression is currently what's happening in what used to be Doggerland. So, the Verminal Bead asks, would the end of glaciation about 10,000 years ago cause marine transgressions, or was the glacial period marine transgressions? So, a glacial maximum, so like an icebox Earth kind of situation, results in the recession of seas. So, when Doggerland was inhabited, we had more glaciers, because that's more of the water of the Earth trapped up in ice, so the sea levels drop. So, that's what a sea transgression is. So if you look at the water between modern England and Scandinavia, you are currently seeing a marine transgression. Now, do terrestrial animals wind up in the sea? Why, yes, they do. For instance, one here, we have what is probably a flying, very primitive bird and a fish. Well, birds fly over water. I don't know if you've ever seen a seabird, but those are things that exist. Oh, marine regression, says Verminal Bead. So I'm not familiar with the term marine regression being used. But I mean, it makes sense to call it that. I just don't remember ever having actually seen that. But maybe I'm wrong. Look, I'm not an expert. Anyway, so, yeah, terrestrial animals can fly over the water. There's one thing. But another thing is, if an animal dies and gets, say, into a river, it may very well be carried into the sea. Or sometimes animals are on the shore and they get preyed upon by nearshore predators, and what remains of them ends up out to sea. So it's really not unusual for terrestrial organisms to end up in the water. Also, in some places, animals will swim between areas. So, like, for much of the Mesozoic, and this is very obviously a Mesozoic fossil here, Europe was basically just a bunch of little islands. What are now the mountains in Europe were the islands of Mesozoic Europe. And so animals would swim or fly between them. And I think we might be getting a guest in. Give me just a second. Hello, guest. Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, there you are. Let me give you a second, and I will share this screen with you. Everybody, welcome Vishanti, who is running a little bit late today.
Hello, everybody.
All right. So, welcome Vishanti. I will be working on getting your picture up there, or if you're on camera, your camera after a break in the middle of this, because I don't want to interrupt everybody. But yeah, guys, Vishanti's here. You can kind of hear her.
Fashionably late.
Yes. All right. So let's continue on with. You only missed about an eighth of the show.
Oh.
Yeah. There you go. All right, here we go. Let's continue on.
Whenever we find land animals, we almost always find ocean fossils mixed right there with it.
Wrong. That is incorrect. So most fossil-bearing rocks are, in fact, in some kind of waterborne sediment. So what we usually find is some kind of aquatic fossils. Now, that can mean freshwater. In fact, a lot of the fossil-bearing layers in which we find terrestrial vertebrates are things like lacustrine or fluvial or estuary-type deposits. So like lakes, rivers, swamps, estuaries, things like this. Which is, a watery part of the land. No one thinks you're out in the middle of an ocean when you're just, on a stream. Like, ever been kayaking in a river? Did you think you were in the ocean? No? Okay, well, that's why. Now, the reason for this is that most sedimentation occurs in water. But we do have examples that are counter to that, like Aeolian sandstone. like the Navajo sandstone, or the sandstone over in Mongolia where the fighting dinosaurs are found. So, you know. And yes, Andrew Cumming, he is in fact forgetting about the dueling dinosaurs. All right, here we go.
If we interpret these findings consistent with the Bible, it is clear that it was due to a single extended global scale event.
Okay. John, do you want to take anything about interpreting fossils consistent with the Bible?
Okay, so to remix something that our good friend old Kenty boy says, if you find a fossil in the dirt, the only thing you know for sure is that it died. You don't even know where it died, you know where it ended up. It's like, you can't say that an animal dying by itself is proof of the flood. It just means their remains were buried.
Yep. And I also want to say that by saying that if you interpret this consistent with X, what you're saying is, I will reject any indication that X isn't true, ever. Which means you're not doing science. Like, this guy has just given away the ballgame. We now know that he is not taking science seriously. What he is doing is using as many post hoc rationalizations as he possibly can to arrive at the conclusion that he already set out knowing he would arrive at. It's
Yeah,
like,
that's putting the cart before the horse.
actually,
Big time.
oh yeah. In fact, I actually saw recently another example, which will actually be coming up on the channel in a few months if you're not a subscriber, and probably next week or not subscriber, sorry, member or patron, and probably next week if you are one, where someone said that the way you can test whether God or the source spirit or whatever, this bunch of new agey nonsense, actually is telling you something is good or bad, is you can link your middle finger and your thumb together on both hands so that they form a ring. And if when you ask a question and you pull your hands apart, the ring doesn't come apart, that's a yes. If it does, that's a no. And so then this guy, who's already a fan of people like Buddha and Jesus, started asking what level of consciousness Jesus and Buddha were on by saying, are they at this level? And like, oh...
Over 9,000!
Yeah, surprise, surprise. This test that has absolutely no way to verify it objectively, and it looks like it depends entirely on your subjective estimations, said that people he already thought were going to have high numbers. What a shock. This is the same thing. If I just assume that the answer to everything is flood, then it doesn't matter what I find. The answer is going to be flood anyway. I'm just going to see what I was looking for in the first place. That's why in science the important thing isn't to look for evidence that you're right. It's to try to prove that you're wrong. Like when Mary Schweitzer found what looked like osteocytes and possible blood vessels and red blood cells in a Tyrannosaurus femur, the initial response from her advisor, which I believe was Jack Horner, was like, well, okay, prove to me that they're not the things that you think they might be. And it wasn't until she really couldn't that she said, well, maybe I should publish on this then. Because she couldn't prove they weren't red blood cells and osteocytes and blood vessels. Now, she still can't prove that they are red blood cells. Red blood cells, there we go. But she can't say they aren't either.
Well, it's also with that one, it kind of made me hate pop sci articles and stuff all over again because everybody started running with this whole, like, she found soft tissue. And I was like, no, you didn't find literal soft tissue. It's not like she found pumping blood. They were
you're
osteocytes.
not gonna crack open this femur and spread the marrow on your toast.
Right. Ew.
Hey, you know what? Roast femur marrow is good on toast. It's like butter, but meatier.
Or if interpreted within the boundaries of philosophical naturalism, repeated inundations of the oceans would be necessary. And our
no. Okay. So here's a few things. Naturalism doesn't on its own a priori demand repeated inundations of the ocean, right? This has been a conclusion of science on the basis of saying, okay, well, since we can't reliably test an omnipotent actor, we can't reliably put it into our theories. So once we say that we can't do that in terms of science, what does the actual physical data indicate to us? Okay, it indicates that At various times throughout the Mesozoic and the Cenozoic, the areas that are now inland in the continents have been underwater, including basically all of Europe a few times, the interior of North America a few times, most of what's now the Amazon basin, as well as most of what's now the Sahara and a little bit of like the area around like Mali and like areas there. I don't know what to tell you. No one sat out saying, "Oh, you know what? I bet God doesn't exist. Therefore, the seas have inundated the land." It's the next thing you jump to. I mean, if God doesn't exist, it's just obvious, right? Like, no, that's not what happened. And I want to point out that this isn't something that's only the godless heathen atheists believe, right? Most Christians are fine with all of this.
Are claimed to have happened due to repeated ice ages, that the oceans came in and the oceans went out.
Like I said, we're currently living in a time when, relative to the not that distant past, geologically speaking, there's currently a sea transgression. Check it out, Doggerland. It's really cool.
Oh, yeah.
You can find ancient campsites, ancient hunting camps, all over the place, right in the ocean. It's a shallow ocean, because that's what you get when you have a sea transgression.
Tide comes in, tide goes out. You can't explain that.
I can't. Nope, nothing about gravity or tidal forces or anything like
Nope.
that. Wait, what's a tidal force? Oh yeah, we named it after the tides.
Sounds fake.
Yeah, that's just atheists making up gravity. We all know it's actually angels that push everything down and that push the moons and planets along in their path.
Yeah, it's how they get their exercise.
I mean, when the rest of your life is just sitting on clouds, strumming, little lyres and harps and whatnot, you gotta do something with your life. Be active. All right, here we go.
The problem is, you just don't find ocean fossils on the outer edges of the continents in the fossil record.
You're right. Many of them are also in the low-lying areas. That's why you find, like, whales in the Sahara or in, like, the Amazon River basin. And also in those mountains that you already admitted lift up. So, I don't know what to tell you.
Counterpoint. No.
Oh, no, I hadn't thought about it that way. Good point.
You find them covering the continents. And that's very difficult to explain. How the ocean came in, covered the continent, and went back out. And
It's literally that the continents aren't all the same height. That's the explanation. Like, this is like a 5th grade explanation. Like, hey, did you know that there are mountains and lowlands on continents? You did? Well, did you know that if the ocean levels were higher, the lower parts would be underwater? Take a look at what's happening to Florida right now, or Venice for that matter. I mean, it's really his baby town. Like, come on, man, you're not 2.
Do we know he's not 2?
I mean, he's been on camera in earlier parts, and he looks like he's probably like mid-40s, early 50s, maybe.
But Benjamin Button?
True, he could have Benjamin Button disease, but then wouldn't he look like he's like 85 or something at 2 years old?
Maybe.
Okay. Well, if Vishanti's voice levels are low, I don't know what to tell you, because I have her turned up to 200%. Vishanti, you might need to get closer to your mic. Sorry about that, guys.
And then land animals continue to survive and evolve throughout these repeated inundations by oceans.
Right, because just like there was never a time when there were no oceans, there was also never really a time after, like, the snowball Earth when there was no land available. Like, I'm trying to take this seriously, guys, but it's just so dumb. Oh, my goodness.
Well, rapid and recent catastrophic burial by sediments is also strongly supported by discoveries of fossilized soft tissues.
Okay, this is a basic misunderstanding that creationists often have. And they think that, soft tissue is only ever preserved in rapid catastrophic burial. This is incorrect. In fact, rapid catastrophic burial is less likely to preserve extensive soft tissue than slow deposition. The key for extensive soft tissue preservation, in most cases, the soft tissue thing in dinosaurs is a slightly different thing, which we'll talk about if we get there. So we're talking now about things like preserving like outlines of skin or filamentous integument, or in this case, fish scales and things like that, right? It actually needs, one, a low oxygen environment so that decay is greatly slowed down, but two, it actually needs slow deposition of fine grains so that the sediment actually has enough fine definition to even preserve the outlines in the first place. You can kind of think of it like resolution on like a 3D printer, right? The higher the resolution is, the smaller the little print lines are, and the more accurate you can make a relatively small model. Well, fine deposition, which only happens slowly, outside of situations with floccules, but that also makes it less likely to preserve these fine details, whatever. That can only happen very slowly, and it can give you this ridiculously high amount of detail. That's why the best fossil sites are almost all slowly deposited rocks that were in low oxygen environments. Whereas if you set your resolution really high, if you have like 1/2 inch print lines, like you're going to get in, a flood deposit, well, only really big things are going to be preserved. Here we go.
Now, geologists claim that fossilization requires millions of years. Many fossils.
No, also wrong. So here we have another basic misunderstanding of taphonomy and fossilization and paleontology. How long a fossil takes to form varies. And it's actually usually not that important. So what's most important is how rapidly, relative to decay, a fossil is buried in sediment. How long it takes to actually permineralize, pretty relevant. And it's usually not millions of years. It's just not.
However, have been discovered that still contain preserved soft tissue that simply could not survive for long periods of time. Some have been found with fully articulated skeletons.
That's not soft tissue. That just means the body wasn't torn apart before it was buried. That's all that means.
Like the fish I show you here. Soft.
Also, remember back when we were doing the 95%, 5% thing? Yeah, fully articulated skeletal tissue. If they've gotten to the point where they've started to form hard parts, then guess what? Not soft tissue. So it's a weird thing to say.
Contents. Recent.
Gut contents are often also not soft tissue. Because what are most of the gut contents that we find? Oh yeah, plant matter. Which preserves better than animal matter because cellulose is tough.
And rapid burial by sediments is strongly supported by fossilized soft tissues. Due to the rapid rate of decomposition, such fossilized soft tissues are clear proof that they were buried rapidly by sediments.
See, that's the thing. The rapidly is relative. So, you guys are probably aware of, like, the South American mummies. I know, Vishanti, you are.
Oh, yeah.
Now, these were not bodies that were generally prepared in some special way like Egyptian mummies, right?
Oh, sorry. Yes, correct.
Right. So, what is it that keeps them from decaying so quickly? Well, it's the environment, right?
The environment, yeah.
They are put in such bone-dry conditions, some of the driest places on Earth, that things that would normally be able to scavenge them, like fungi and bacteria, and even most animals, simply don't. There's not enough water.
Peruvian and Chilean highlands are extremely dry.
Right. And that's... Now, this is probably not going to result in a fossil anytime soon, because they tend not to be in areas with lots of deposition. But the idea is, things don't decay at the same rate. So, for instance, you can have a human full of soft tissues for thousands and thousands of years up in the top of the Andes, that if you were, say, have that same body in, say, the Amazon basin, it would be gone in days. The same thing is also true underwater. There are parts of the of all water ecosystems where decay happens faster or slower. So, for instance, there are areas in the ocean with such high salinity that the high salinity water actually can do things like form underwater rivers, and those are places where there's very little living there. Where you can have areas in lagoons where it's so silty and muddy that there are essentially no algae down there, and so there's essentially no oxygen, and so only anaerobic bacteria can persist, and anaerobic bacteria, one, aren't as numerous as aerobic bacteria, and two, they have a slower metabolism because oxygen is what allows you to have a faster metabolism. So when all that's eating you is anaerobic bacteria, you take much, much, much longer to decay.
Yeah, and there's a lot of true crime cases where someone left a body in, a vat of stuff or put them in a basement or a well or something, and just due to the conditions, they mummified.
Yep,
So
actually,
it's not like, oh no, this is a thing, it takes hundreds of years. Like, nope, it could take a few months if you're really good.
bog mummies are another aspect of this, right? Which is in fact involving water. Bog mummies are not typically prepared for mummification, but we find them in places like Ireland and Florida. Very different parts of the world, but still, they both have these bogs with anoxic conditions that are hostile to most things that would cause things to decay. And if you drop bodies in there, they're going to persist.
Yeah, I was gonna say that a lot of the common, I guess, conditions is that these mummified bodies are not exposed to air.
Yep.
If they happen to be in a place that's not, the Atacama Desert.
Right. So yeah, we know many, many ways for deposition to be faster than decay without it being what you would call rapid in terms of flood water.
Not over long time periods. Delicate structures like eyes and soft feathery appendages are preserved in fossil forms.
Yeah, we know.
Many of them are identical to animals and plants we have today.
So that's a claim that's often bandied about and rarely, if ever, supported. There basically are no fossil species that are identical to any modern species. There just aren't. Now, there are members of identifiable modern groups, and of course, beetle is a pretty big group. I don't know if you know this, but if you're an animal, there's a pretty good chance you're a beetle. Beetles are a huge portion and a huge diversity. So, yeah, that there were beetles in the past is not surprising, and that you can successfully label them as such is extra not surprising. What would be very surprising is if you could say, well, this is the beetle, and then you give me a genus and species, and then we find that it is actually morphologically identical to an extant beetle species, despite this. So,
I mean, it's literally like finding a fossilized cat and going, cat.
yeah. Oh,
No,
I'm getting
the beetles, like the
buffering too. Shanti, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, so we're gonna see what happens. I'm gonna keep an eye on the upload rate. For some reason, OBS is now just not giving me the warning lights when my upload rate goes down. So we'll see, guys. I don't know. It's a struggle. I've got a new wireless adapter, and even that is not keeping this up all the time. Except my other internet stuff isn't going down. Like my guests can still hear me, so we'll see what happens.
I'm kind of concerned that you're not using a wired connection.
I would love to. I don't have one available.
Okay.
Yep.
Just throwing that out there.
Yep.
They're often found so well preserved that we can identify them by species.
Then do
Okay,
so.
which species of fern?
Right? Like, don't just tell me you can. Do it.
Just do it.
My goodness.
Again, delicate structures like the membranous wings of a dragonfly
Weird way to say membranous, but whatever.
and compound eyes are preserved in the rock record.
Hey, compound eyes are generally mineralized, and therefore they don't count as soft tissue. Fun fact. Well, the lenses are mineralized, but that's what you're finding anyway.
Trilobites, which is what you see here, are extinct creatures, but their eyes were so well preserved in fossil specimens that it enabled paleontologists to learn about their unique eyes.
Okay, trilobite eyes are especially not soft tissue. And here's why. The lens of trilobite eyes was made of calcite, which is an optically weird mineral that basically only allows light to come in one direction. And you can try it yourself. It's really weird. Like, if you shine light to the side through calcite crystals, it basically doesn't propagate at all. But if you put calcite crystals like on top of things, you can see right through it. And when you pull them away, it's fuzzy. It's a whole bunch of weirdness. Anyway, yeah, this is a very much not very water-soluble, not subject to organic decay mineral that is biodeposited on the lenses of trilobite eyes. It's like, oh my goodness, the soft tissue of calcite, a rock, is preserved. How is this possible? Because it's already a rock, dude. It's like the hydroxyapatite of your bones. It's already a rock. There's not that much work to do on it. It's very annoying, this particular talking point. Sorry.
He just thinks that eyeball means soft, squishy thing.
Well, he must, right? Because it's true for him. It's true for vertebrates, but that doesn't make it true for all things that have ever existed.
And this specimen was buried so quickly by sediments that it didn't have time to even retract its eye stalks.
Holy crap. Did he just say what I think he did?
It didn't have time to what?
Those aren't retractable eye stalks, dude. Those are on the already biomineralized exoskeleton. That's hard tissue. Oh my goodness. Why am I not drinking? Maybe I should be drinking.
Retract the eye stalks.
Tell you what, buddy. You let me know when next time you can manage to retract your arm into your body, and then I'll take this seriously. Because in both cases, we're talking about extremities that are supported by hard biomineralized tissue. I hate this so much.
Retract my kneecaps.
Right. It's... My goodness. How did it have time to retract its exoskeleton? Guys, I might... Venerable B says, insert that JonTron clip. I don't have it handy in OBS. I should.
Yeah, SHB says, that guy didn't have time to retract his statement.
Okay, this is breaking me a little bit here, but we're going to keep going. And we're going to see how much worse it gets, because holy crap.
Dude said, it's stupid even if they can retract. Oh no, I'm about to die. Let me retract my eye stalks.
Won't help much, but you know.
They have eyes up on eye stalks just like snails.
No, not like a snail.
Scary.
Like one of those flies that has... So, I don't remember what they're called. If anyone in the chat can look it up for me, that would be great. But there's a group of flies, I think it's a genus, where the male has these eyes out on crazy eye stalks. And it does actually inflate them. Shortly after pupating, it actually takes in a bunch of air and pushes the eyes out while the exoskeleton is still soft. But then once it hardens, that's it. That's where the eyes are now. And these are a sexually selected for thing. I can't say for certain whether this was sexual selection or if it was like, you know, this thing was burrowing around in the muck and it kept eye stalks up so it could see. But yeah, that's the kind of eye stalk we're talking about. Or like the eye stalk of, say, a crab, right? Where obviously these are longer, but crabs can't just suck in their exoskeleton, right? They have little notches that they can place their eye stalks into, but still they can't absorb it like the soft tissues of a snail. Yeah, stalk-eyed flies, yeah. Thank you, Glarn Budin. I probably should have remembered that, because it's literally what they are. So if you ever want to see a really weird-looking fly, look up the stalk-eyed flies. They're bizarre.
Didn't have time to even pull in his eyes. Well, the problem with finding fossilized soft tissue like stomach contents is that animals...
Stomach contents does not equal soft tissue. Just putting it out there again.
don't just lie around waiting for sediments to slowly cover them,
I mean, they kind
they
of
do because they're dead.
Right, they're not going anywhere.
allowing for fossilization. When an animal or plant dies, decomposition is a very rapid thing, and it's a necessary part of an ecosystem
If
to
it's
make the
left exposed to the elements.
Right. In an area where life is relatively abundant. Not all situations are like that. Weird.
Hashtag Atacama Desert.
Right? The thing that bugs me is that they'll say things like, oh, we don't see this happening today. And it's like, what are you talking about? It's right here. This is a place where it's happening. Right now. There are fossils forming. Like, nah. That peat bog, that doesn't count. Why not? Just because.
But see, we've already decided that the peat bog proves that there were red-haired giant Caucasian people in North America, so we can't use them twice.
I hate that so much.
those materials again available to the next generation. Predators and scavengers will feed on the fleshy parts of the body. Bacteria and fungi, the decomposers, are responsible for breaking down most of the remains. And then chemical reactions like oxidation make short work of what's left, and it becomes dust in the wind. And
now
is dust in the wind, dude.
What could prevent all these oxygen-dependent activities, do you think?
Well, I would surmise that being buried with sediment. But that'd just be a guess.
And what if you were already in an area with low oxygen in the first place?
Get lucky.
Yeah, almost like all those wonderful fossils that we find in places like the Solnhofen limestone. Yeah, anoxic environments where deposition is continuous. Weird.
no time at all. Only rapid and massive burial by sediments is sufficient to explain soft tissues.
It's
No.
not, my guy. You don't want to throw fossils in the ocean equivalent of a washing machine.
Nope.
It's going to tear them apart, and they won't be buried intact. That's
Plus-
why you need relatively calm conditions for a fish.
Plus, like we said, the grain size is what's largely going to determine how fine the detail is that you can preserve. And because of how physics works, small grains have a more substantial effect from Brownian motion, so they tend to be suspended in a water column for longer. Whereas the larger a grain is, the more likely the force of gravity is going to be dominant on it over Brownian motion, which means that rapidly deposited sediment tends to have larger grain size. Larger grain size is less able to preserve fine impressions, just like when we talked about the resolution of 3D printers.
And in even simpler terms, it's like sandpaper.
Yeah,
These
I mean, it'll
giant
strip things.
particles are just sanding and stripping away all this, matter. So, good grief.
Yeah, Saab B says that Kent thinks a dinosaur death pose is the bird trying to hold its head above the floodwater, which is odd because if you were to stand it up, usually the middle of the neck would be higher than the head. Which, I don't know if you know, but it's not very effective.
Maybe they all had the pelican skill where they kind of stick their neck through their little beak sack.
Maybe.
They all did that.
Except most of them, the head isn't actually in that position, though. So, doesn't work so well.
Rapid and massive burial will slow decomposition and allow for fossilization.
Not on its own, it won't. It depends on the environment.
For many fossils, it is clear that they were killed by the sedimentary flows that entombed them.
Oh, how would we determine
really?
this? This will be interesting.
Citation needed.
Yeah, let's get a citation needed video up there. Because that really does need a citation. Or at the very least, an explanation.
Once buried by sediments, water infused with minerals must then be present for mineralization to take place.
Mineralization.
Permineralization. But also,
that copyright AIG 2003.
Sorry, AIG, I'm displaying this with fair use, although there's a fair chance that they will copyright strike me because what do we know about AIG?
Bag of dicks.
Yup. So, also, here's something fun. Fossils don't have to be permineralized. if there's a situation where, like, the hydroxyapatite of a skeleton is unlikely to decay, it can just persist as unpermineralized hydroxyapatite. That's a thing.
So there's at least some difference in how invertebrates are fossilized because we found them.
Mm-hmm. Like, mollusk shells don't really need to be replaced either. People have found fossil mollusk shells where the thing they're holding is basically the original material.
I actually have a couple of those in my house right now. Fossilized mollusks. They were recovered in New Mexico, actually, when I stayed with a friend. So,
Nice.
yeah.
Water that's saturated by minerals has to trickle through where that bone or shell was to eventually deposit minerals as the bone or shell decays, creating a rock-like copy of the original animal.
That is a more typical thing, right? Permineralization
So I'm gonna have to
does result in a large portion of the fossils that exist.
So it had to be buried by sediments rapidly, like in a catastrophic event, and water laden with minerals has to be present for mineralization to take place.
Okay, but here's the thing about subterranean water. It tends to be full of minerals because it's under the ground, surrounded by minerals. Like, I really don't know anymore, man. Like, it's already water percolating through rocks. We think it's going to be distilled water under there?
Both of these are processes that we would expect during a flood.
I mean, kinda?
$100 for last night.
Look, floods do leave behind fossils,
Yeah.
although the permineralization, there's a word that I can say, generally doesn't happen during the flood, but whatever.
Some animals have been found that were buried so quickly by sediments that their fossil record records a snapshot of a moment in time.
Or, bear with me now, maybe a fish bit into another fish that was a bit too large, and the spines of its last meal actually killed it, which is a thing that happens to fish today. And then now that both fish are dead, they get fossilized. Is that possible? I mean, humans die choking today. That's a thing that happens. We know fish die this way, both with and without becoming fossilized. So there's no reason to think this fish died while it was fossilized and buried while it was trying to catch this other fish.
This fish was buried before it had time to finish gulping down its meal.
Or maybe it died before that because it couldn't gulp down the meal because it bit off more than it could chew, kind of metaphorically.
Thus, it became the petrified Last Supper.
Ha ha ha.
This ichthyosaur, an extinct marine reptile, was in the process of giving birth.
Well, so that's a maybe. So here's a few things. One, death in childbirth is kind of a thing. It actually used to be a pretty common cause of death among humans, and it still happens among other animals that give live birth, especially ones who give birth to relatively large babies compared to the mother's body size, which I think you can see here is the case, right? But also, there's a phenomenon called coffin birth, wherein, despite an animal not having begun to give birth, it's pregnant and it dies, which, the fetus is probably not going to survive this, and so it dies too. But then decay gases build up in the reproductive tract and expel the fetus either partway or fully from the digestive tract. Why is it called coffin birth? Well, because it happens to pregnant humans who die. Like, throughout all of history, people have noticed that sometimes, if you exhume the body of a pregnant person, you find that the fetus has come out as a result of decay gases. So, which one is this? Is this death in childbirth? Is it rapid burial during a flood? Actually, I happen to know it's not that, because this is from Jurassic limestone that absolutely was not flood rock. Because I've checked into this fossil before. Or was it coffin birth? I don't know. I actually tend to favor coffin, at least partially explaining this by coffin birth, because of how far out the baby is. But we also know that it's definitely not a flood because this is fine-grained or shale with no flocculation, so it wasn't rapidly deposited.
When buried by sediments, allowing the event to become fossilized.
No.
Lots of animals thought to have gone extinct 65 million years or more have been discovered with soft tissues like the Hadrosaur that you see here.
Okay, I'm pretty sure this is Leonardo, which is a fairly famous quote-unquote mummy. It's hard to tell a little bit because, one, my memory of Leonardo isn't perfect, and two, like, the weird isolation that they've done kind of removes some of the context. But, yeah, this fossil includes things like, casts of muscles, skin impressions, and gut contents. I mean, it does, but none of that is impossible over the course of millions of years.
Was skin still intact? And if
Well, I mean, look at it. It's not intact, right? You can see where the places where there's no skin.
fully articulated skeleton.
That's true.
We've also found cartilage and stomach contents from hadrosaurs.
Now, I would need a citation on the cartilage, but the stomach contents is correct, although it's almost entirely from this one specimen. Now, the reason for that is because if you find bits of leaves and twigs and whatnot around the area of the gut, there are two possibilities. One is that stomach contents... sorry, a little cough. So one possibility is its stomach contents. But another possibility is that perhaps as the animal was decaying and its skin and muscles were kind of getting gone, that some plant debris washed in with whatever water was bringing the sediment in. And that ended up settling in the relatively protected region around the gut. That's actually more likely. The difference is with Leonardo that because the fossil was so exceptionally well preserved that it was actually less likely that that's what happened. And so the presumption that it's actually gut contents is stronger than that it's not. For this one specimen, right? Not for dinosaurs generally or something.
Stomach contents were in fact so well preserved in a number of extinct animals that paleontologists were able to identify their diets.
I mean, yeah.
And therefore their habitat. The hadrosaur, a duck-billed dinosaur, is once thought to be semi-aquatic because it had a duck-like bill, and they assumed that it used its mouth part the way that waterfowl do, sifting through mud.
Okay, but we knew that wasn't the case since long before we found identifiable hadrosaur gut contents. But, you know, hey, go on.
So like this old picture shows, they were thought to be semi-aquatic, but analysis of stomach contents revealed that they foraged in much higher elevations. They weren't aquatic.
Well, okay. So not every hadrosaur is the same, right? But yeah, generally speaking, they were very terrestrial.
Semi-aquatic at all. Well, hadrosaur bones have also been found that are not even mineralized. This toe bone...
Right, because bone is a rock, right? It already is. I mean, I don't know what else to tell you.
Is on display at the University of Alaska in Fairbanks, which allows visitors to touch real dinosaur bone.
Yeah, that's not unheard of. I don't know.
The caption reads, "This is real dinosaur bone from the hind foot of a genus of hadrosaur."
Ugranaluk, which right now looks like it's probably a junior synonym for, oh, what is it now? Anatosaurus? Okay, look. This complex of, like, Edmontosaurus, Anatosaurus, Ugranaluk is a little bit complicated and contentious. I think it's actually Edmontosaurus. So, remember correctly, right now, Ugranaluk is probably a junior synonym of Edmontosaurus. But, you know what? Generic names are arbitrary anyway, so who cares?
Although it is 69 million years old.
Yes, Venerable Edmontosaurus,
Nice.
I know. Hey, welcome back.
It is still original bone and not rock.
Okay.
I hate to tell you, but bone doesn't lay around for 69 million years before it decomposes and decays.
It sure
Actually-
does in some cases. So,
Oh.
this is another area. So, where was Ugranaluk found? Oh, in northern Alaska. Now, northern Alaska at the time of Edmontosaurus wasn't exactly the frozen wasteland that it is today, which is basically anything above the Canadian border, as far as I'm concerned. It's a frozen wasteland. But it was very cold there, and there were areas where animals could die and their bones could be relatively rapidly covered. And then if a bone is surrounded in an area where it's frequently frozen and it's covered in sediment, I mean, the actual mineral of the bone can persist for an indefinite amount of time. All right, let's, first we're going to take a break, and then we're going to hear about this Nodosaur, which I don't know why he's so reluctant to actually be more specific, like a genus and species, but because this is Borealopelta, right? Like, we know that. But whatever. We'll figure that out when I pour some more water into this glass, even though now I think it probably should just be a big old glass of vodka based on how this is going. Alright, we'll be right back, guys. All right, welcome back, everybody. So yeah, we know that this is Borealopelta Mark Mitchellly, and not just a random Nodosaur. And the Bumblebee says, Anatosaurus, by the way, because Edmontosaurus is older, unless you're going to argue that actually you're looking at a different genus because you're looking at the specimens originally identified as Anatosaurus were like 15 million years or so separated from like Edmontosaurus, so who knows? Anyway, here we go.
This Nodosaur
Mm-hmm.
date was, and tremendous discovery was made of a Nodosaur that dates back, according to conventional dating, 110 million years old.
Okay.
But is so well preserved, it seems to be staring back at you from its exquisitely preserved eye socket that you see there.
Oh, okay, so here's a thing, right? Once something becomes a fossil, it's not going to significantly deteriorate unless the rock it's in itself gets destroyed. Right? It's not like, oh, once it's exquisitely preserved, now the clock is ticking, give it a few 100,000 years and that preservation is just going to be gone. Like, that's not how this works.
Skin was also preserved around its neck.
Mm-hmm.
Also note the spikes around its neck and shoulder, spikes that were up to 20 inches long. This thing was formidable.
I mean, yeah, it definitely was.
Ribs were preserved in this Nodosaur. Stomach contents were preserved as well, showing the remnants of the dinosaur's last meal. Well, in 2005, a Tyrannosaurus rex was discovered in the Hell Creek Formation of...
Hey, it's Mary Schweitzer's work. Let's take a quick drink, even though this is just water. Because, of course, we're going to get into Mary Schweitzer's work. All right. Vandali 1998, who's been a member for 22 months at the level of Amniote, says, hey, me and Eric the Tyrannoceratops will be reviewing the 6 Jurassic movies in 6 hours, that's easy to remember, at 10 p.m. EDT, talking about how they portray the dinosaurs in the movie. Well, there you go, guys. So that will also be, what is that, 7 PDT? Yeah, that's how math works, right? All right, so guys, if you're interested, go there. Vandalia, I think you have a wrench. I think you can post the link if you want to. Pretty sure you do. If you don't, let me know, and I should be able to get the link out.
Montana by North Carolina State University professor Dr. Mary Schweitzer.
Well, okay, so this is a little nitpicky, but it wasn't actually found by her, and when it was found, she wasn't a professor of anything. She was a PhD student. So it's like, yeah, that's who she is now, but saying that it was found by her as Professor, Schweitzer, with, like, that's not accurate. But whatever, it's, like I said, it's a little nitpicky.
Well, due to its enormous weight, after wrapping the femur of this Tyrannosaur in plaster Paris, they couldn't lift it. They couldn't airlift it out of the area by helicopter as planned. So they broke the femur of this T-Rex in half to transport it out of the area.
Now, that is not my recollection of the find here. My recollection is that it unfortunately broke in transit, which is a thing that happens, but also not really relevant.
Well, upon unpacking the bones containing the unpacking the bones in her lab, she immediately noticed that the bone contained medullary tissue.
No, it was not immediate. It was after getting thin cross-sections of the bone for microscopy, which was her goal in the first place. So whether or not the bone was intact, it wouldn't have mattered. She was about to saw through it. Like, that was her plan. And yes, she did notice that it had medullary tissue, which, by the way, is bone. So we're not talking about soft tissue when it comes to medullary tissue. So I guess I should explain, what is medullary tissue, right? Because that's probably not, like, on the tip of everyone's tongue, is medullary tissue. Medullary tissue is bone that is deposited in the hollow areas of long bones in birds when they're preparing to lay eggs. Because bird eggs, their shells are very high in calcium. So the bird needs an extra reserve of calcium in order to deposit the eggshells without itself ending up, like, basically with bird osteoporosis. This is a thing that also, if a human becomes pregnant many, many times, that can also cause loss of bone density for this reason, right? Because the calcium that goes into the baby's bones has to come from somewhere. And if you're not taking in enough calcium, guess where it's going to come from? Yeah, the bones of the mother. So that is what medullary bone is. Now, Until this, medullary bone had only been known to occur in birds. Gonna get the only in the right place there. This was the first time it had been found in a non-bird, but it had been predicted that animals close to birds, like Coelurosaur dinosaurs, of which T-Rex is one, might also have developed medullary bone. So not only was this the first time that a dinosaur, a non-avian dinosaur, or actually any fossil dinosaur for that matter, could be positively identified as to which sex it was, it also helped confirm a prediction of evolutionary biology, which is that some dinosaurs would also have medullary tissue when they were either preparing to lay eggs or while they were gravid, which is sort of like pregnant, but instead of having a fetus developing inside of the reproductive tract directly, it's developing inside an egg, which is still in the reproductive tract. So it's a little technical distinction between being gravid and being pregnant. Whatever. Here we go.
which prompted further microscopic analysis.
No. Look, he's going to get this wrong, but I'll let him actually get it wrong before we talk about it.
From the marrow cavity, Schweitzer found soft, flexible tissue that...
Yeah, no, okay, so he's skipping over a lot. The find of the medullary bone did not directly lead to Mary Schweitzer saying, oh, well, I wonder what else is in here. Let's look for soft tissue or something. What actually happened was she had a lab assistant who went and took the bone and left it in an acid bath, which is supposed to remove the the minerals and stuff on the fossil that didn't result directly from the actual tissue of the animal. But the lab assistant, and presumably Mary herself, or sorry, I should say Dr. Schweitzer. Everyone calls her Dr. Mary Schweitzer or Mary Schweitzer, so for some reason I just default to using her first name. It's not appropriate. I should be calling her Dr. Schweitzer. Although at this time she was still, I guess Miss Schweitzer, because she wasn't a PhD yet. Doesn't matter. It's not important. Right now I'm going to call her Dr. Schweitzer. We're at the timeline. So, Dr. Schweitzer says, oh no, we forgot the bone in the acid bath. That's probably ruined all the mineralized portions of the fossil, which to a large extent it had, but then it also revealed microscopic, spongy little bits of molecular fossils, which are not the original molecules, by the way. They are chemically altered to be more resistant to decay less. And it wasn't just because she looked at the microscope and was like, medullary bone, let's investigate further. This was an accidental discovery, as many great discoveries in science are. DM Wing says for $5, science discovered something new, therefore science is wrong. That is basically what this is coming down to. So let's continue on with this horribly mangled version of how Dr. Schweitzer found dinosaur soft tissue.
That upon treatment could be stretched and would return back to its original form. Well, since the T-Rex is believed to have gone extinct 65 million
66, but okay.
years ago, soft tissue was completely unexpected.
It was. So there's a few reasons for this. One was, at the time, there was not a well-established chemical mechanism as to why it could be that these, how it could be that these molecules could be preserved. We now have chemical mechanisms, and also it's interesting to note that the soft quote-unquote tissue that's most frequently preserved tends to be things like collagen, which is already one of the toughest biomolecules in existence. And also, no one had ever decided to just, leave their but very valuable dinosaur bone specimens in a vat of acid for a few weeks. That wasn't exactly standard procedure.
Oops.
Right? Yeah, this was a mistake. Everyone thought this was going to be a disaster and that the specimens were going to be destroyed. Because no one was doing that. Because the most likely outcome is, you just destroy the whole thing. Generally speaking, if you want something to be, able to be studied, leaving it in a vat of acid for 2 weeks isn't the way to do it. Vandeli 1998 for $5 says, is her discovery still the newest, youngest claim that YEC is still used? Sorry. Or is there something actually more recent that they claim now? That's a good question. When was the Boreal Pelta specimen found? Because I think it was newer than that, the one we just saw. So it was described in 2017, which means it was probably found in 2014 or 15. So yeah, I would say that the Boreal Pelta fossil that we saw is actually younger than this, because this Schweitzer discovery was like, I think it was like the early to mid-aughts, if I remember correctly. But yeah, it's not quite the newest thing that they use.
In her amazement, she also found what appeared to be blood vessels and what she believed were red blood cells with nuclei, typical of reptiles and birds, but not found in mammals.
Well, yeah, you'd expect that in a T-Rex. Okay, yeah.
The vessels were even revealed to be lined with specialized bone endothelial cells.
Which actually are the only cells that she positively identified in the whole thing, right? She was unable to identify what you're seeing on screen as definitive blood vessels or definitive blood cells. So I do think it's important that we point out that Dr. Schweitzer was much more circumspect than the creationists would like her to be, because she's this thing called a good scientist. Inkboy for €5 says, discussing Dr. Schweitzer's work is totally an AIG move without the sack. Now take a drink of water, stay hydrated. Yes, stay hydrated, everybody. It's very important. I say that as someone who was once severely dehydrated as a result of not getting my pneumonia treated for weeks. Fun times.
Well, initially, skeptical scientists suggested that what appeared to be blood vessels were simply bacterial biofilms.
Yep, that was one of the original ideas. And Dr. Schweitzer did successfully disconfirm that, because basically the chemistry was inconsistent with bacterial biofilms, because she was finding things like molecular fossils of collagen, which bacteria don't make. So, but the thing is, that's how science is supposed to work, right? When you say, hey, I found this weird, crazy thing, other scientists are supposed to say, hold on now. Are you sure it's just not something we're already expecting? Because in most of the time, if you come up to science and you say, oh, I found this amazing new thing that no one ever expected, you're wrong. That's what's usually the case. Wasn't in this case, which, I mean, good for Dr. Schweitzer. But, like, yeah, that's just how science is supposed to work.
Bacteria will create, will secrete organic material that forms a film, and it was argued that this is all that these parent blood vessels were. However, Dr. Schweitzer did some more work and ultimately found collagen was present.
Okay, so yes and no. What she found were molecular collagen fossils. So what had happened is other things, primarily iron, had replaced some of the atoms in the original collagen molecule, which then caused the collagen to wrap in on itself more tightly, which made it itself more resistant to decay, less likely to decay. So she was not actually finding original collagen. She was finding chemically modified and therefore more resistant remains of collagen
in these blood vessels. A material, a protein that's found in vertebrates, but not something that's made by bacteria.
I mean, it is true that it's in vertebrates, but like animals, my dude. Animals. Okay.
So it appeared conclusive that what she in fact found were T-Rex blood vessels and...
Nope, that was not the conclusive part. That is still not been concluded. That's a possibility that cannot be disconfirmed yet, but also is not sufficiently demonstrated.
Red blood cells from...
Also no. Again, not sufficiently demonstrated. And that's according to Dr. Schweitzer, not me. She and I actually would probably agree that that's probably what we're looking at. Can't demonstrate it, though.
An animal that was thought to have gone extinct 65 million years ago. Well, soft
66.
tissues like these have now been discovered that date.
I love that this looks like a D&D 5e table. It's got the exact coloring from the Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition rulebooks.
Yep.
Like it could say roll a D% here at the top left. Oh my goodness. Yeah, look, we know, since it was first discovered how to figure out if there are molecular remains of soft tissue like this, other people have done it. That's, again, how science works. Once you realize a new technique works, everyone tries it.
By conventional methods well beyond 100 million years. These discoveries are strong proof that these tissues are not that old, but were instead buried recently and catastrophically.
No, it's just not, though. And the reason, like I said, is because they're chemically altered in ways that makes them essentially be able to last indefinitely. And they were all already extremely resilient molecules in the first place. So, and also, not everything here is actually preserved in the sense of actually preserved as relatively soft stuff. So let's take a look at what we actually have here. Live bacteria from separate rock salts. I don't know how you know that's, but like, okay, the rock might have been 250 million years old. I don't know why you think the bacteria was. Ichthyosaur skin. I'm familiar with this one, actually. It was a skin impression, which, yeah, skin impression. Keratin from a Madagascar Cretaceous bird. Not actually familiar with that one, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say that just like Boreal pelta, it was probably actually still permineralized. T-Rex collagen. Yep, that's fair enough. Live non-spore bacteria in amber. I'm gonna press X to doubt on that one. Where is that even published? I can't even see. Green, Blatt, CL, Microbial Ecology. I mean, that might be something interesting to look into. T-Rex soft tissue, generic, but I mean, sure. Soft frog, intact. What does intact mean? Because that to me, that means it's gonna like hop away, but I don't know. T-Rex collagen, yeah, we know. Bloody frog bone marrow. Okay. I should look into this, because a lot of this is, one, stuff that I don't believe you found bloody frog marrow in Geology from McNamara M.E. et al. You know, let's do a quick Google Scholar search, shall we? Let's see what happens. So we'll go to scholar.google.com, and we will type in McNamara M.E. Let's see. Geology. Let's see what we get. Okay, this looks like it's it. High fidelity organic preservation of bone marrow in an approximately 10 million year old amphibians. So I would have to buy this, but let's just read. Let's just read the abstract, right, and see what the basic idea of this paper is. Bone marrow in circa 10 million year old frogs and salamanders from the Miocene of Libros, Spain, represents the first fossilized example of this extremely decay-prone tissue. The bone marrow, preserved in 3 dimensions, is an organic residue. I'm already calling BS on bloody. It's the residue of bone marrow. Retains the original texture and red-yellow color of the hematopoietic and fatty marrow, respectively. Moldic osteoclasts and vascular structures are also present. We attribute exceptional preservation, there we go, of the fossilized bone marrow to cryptic preservation. The bones of the amphibians formed protective microenvironments and inhibited microbial infiltration. Specimens in which bone marrow is preserved vary in their completeness and articulation and the extent to which body outline is preserved as a thin film of organically preserved bacteria. So there was a bacterial film too, that's interesting. Cryptic preservation of these labile tissues is thus to a large extent independent of and cannot be predicted by the taphonomic history of the remainder of the specimen. Vishanti, are you surprised the first one that seems suspicious that I looked up, they misreported? Because I'm not.
I'm not.
Yeah, I'm not surprised at all. All right, so we're gonna go on from this D&D table after the first one I checked, guys. Like, come on. I hate this so much. Bloody frog bones. Residue derived from bone marrow. Okay, great.
Fossil graveyards are another powerful evidence of catastrophism.
That's actually usually true. And the thing is, catastrophism or catastrophism, which is usually how I say it, isn't something that's like rejected by science. I mean, look, we have a volcanologist in chat. Hi, Landon. Landon, I'm sure, knows that catastrophic events happen on Earth and can leave behind significant geological evidence. I say this because he's a man who studies volcanoes in Hawaii. He's aware. Like, my goodness. All right, here we go.
As a mechanism behind the fossil record. The Dinosaur National Monument, which is shown here, is located in northwestern Colorado and straddles the border of Utah and protects a large deposit of dinosaur fossils belonging to at least 11 different kinds of dinosaurs. More
Okay.
than half of all the dinosaurs that have been discovered in North America are found in this one bone bed.
Okay, so that would mean that the number of North American dinosaurs would have to be somewhere around 22, right? Because if nearly half of them are here, and there's about 11 in here, that would mean there could only be 22 North American dinosaurs, say genera. So let's find out. You know what? Here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna go Lance Formation, Paleofauna, and this is a fun thing you can do. So you can click on the Lance Formation on Wikipedia, and then you can go to Paleontology, and you can say, okay, hey, look, so here's a list of just the Coelurosaurs. So let's see. We have Apatornis, Ceramornis, Cymoleptrix, another possible Cymoleptrix, but we'll just count it at the same time. Graculavis, Lamarquavis, Loncoditis? I'm not sure. Paleotringa, Palantropus, Potomornis, Torotix. Let's see. Unnamed. We won't count unnamed. So we're already at 10. So I can only name 2 more dinosaurs, or we're out of dinosaurs for North America. And this is in one formation, by the way, guys. Oblisodon? I don't know. It's Aublysodon. So that's it. We're done for dinosaurs. There are no more dinosaurs in North America, except, we also have Ornithomimus, Hronecodon, Pectinodon, Tyrannosaurus. I'm not going to count Nanotyrannus because it's just Tyrannosaurus, but Ankylosaurus, Denversaurus, Edmontonia, Paleoscincus, Agathalmus, Leptoceratops, Nedoceratops, Pachycephalosaurus, Stygimoloch, well, that's Pachycephalosaurus anyway, Torosaurus, Triceratops, Edmontosaurus, Thescelosaurus, Thepsius, Thracodon. So according to this guy, there are 22 North American dinosaurs. There's more than that in just the Lance Formation. Like, I don't know what to tell you guys. Like, this is just blatant dishonesty. It's one formation. One late Cretaceous formation. Okay.
Entire communities of organisms are found buried together in these bone beds, what we call mass mortality beds.
Funny how the one on the right doesn't have any bones, but whatever. Also, the one on the left looks like a bunch of Tanystropheus. It says Keikosaur. I'm not familiar with this location. That might be something to look into, because it looks really cool.
Again, supporting the catastrophic nature.
I did forget to put Vishanti on screen.
Oh, well, I'm not my normal chatty self, so it's fine.
I'm going to tell you right now. I'm looking at Vishanti, and she's wearing an excellent Wonder Woman cosplay. It's very, very expertly done. So there you go.
It's all CGI.
Well, it's still expertly done.
Of the sedimentary flows that prevented them from decomposing and allowing them to become a fossil.
Okay, prevented from decomposing is not quite the same, because if something were prevented from decomposing, it would be undecomposed today. We would have all of it. So it's that decomposition was slow enough that preservation could happen. Also, for $5 from Van Dyne 1998, we have, it's weird growing up and thinking certain dinos were species and later finding out they were entire orders or families. Yeah, the public's perception of what dinosaurs are what and like what groups they fall into is a bit skewed. And I don't have a great way to fix that other than saying, like, if you care, I mean, just look into it more. Because, I don't know. I don't know a great way to solve that problem. Because it's, in many cases, the details of, dinosaur taxonomy are very technical and, like, most people wouldn't be interested. Plus, most people kind of stop being super interested in dinosaurs by the time they get, like, I don't know, to be 12. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there's an easy fix for that. I'm also not sure if it's really that big of a problem. Like, if you go through your entire life thinking that, like, I don't know, Tyrannosaur is synonymous with Tyrannosaurus Rex, is it really going to impact your life negatively? Probably not.
Some of these fossils are, in fact, oriented. Now,
yeah, it's almost like there's a dominant flow direction underwater, which is Pretty typical of water. Just gonna put it out there. Not exactly unexpected.
These are nautiloids, and look at the scale.
Well, some of them are nautiloids, some of them are obviously orthocones, but okay.
Of these things. Some of these nautiloids were absolutely massive.
Oh, that's 10 feet on there. Okay, fair enough. I kind of missed the scale bar. Sorry, guys. I actually have a harder time seeing this video than you guys do, because my microphone is smack in the middle of it.
6 to 8 feet long. Where's their shells? But they're oriented in one direction. It must have required a
Well, roughly in one direction. I mean, look, at the bottom here, the bottom two cones are basically 90 degrees to each other. But they're mostly oriented so that the broadest part of the cone is at the bottom of the screen, the top, the thinnest part is at the top. So, yeah, there was probably some current.
very unusual dynamic conditions such as rapid underwater flows of sediments to
It doesn't actually have to be all that rapid to roughly orient shells like this. Plus, here's another thing. We're not seeing careful preservation of soft tissue. These are already hard mineralized parts of mollusks. These are the kind of thing that doesn't actually take all that much work to fossilize. The kinds of thing that might fossilize when literally nothing else does. In fact, there are parts of the United States where you basically can't walk without stepping on thousands of mollusk shells that are fossilized. Dr. Joel Duff over on his Joel Duff YouTube channel has a whole really cool video about belemnite cones. Belemnites are an extinct group of cephalopods that had a probably internal shell, kind of like a modern cuttlebone. Sorry. And he's gone on to hikes where almost the entirety of the ground is just made of these belemnite shells. And there are virtually no other fossils there.
orient all these big nautiloids in one direction. Well, I believe when you examine the fossil record, you see that there is powerful evidence there for a global scale flood.
Even if I were to agree that this could only result from really strong flow, which that's not really true. So the fact that you found a fossil site that's consistent with flooding doesn't mean that the ones that aren't suddenly are, right? It's like, you know those mud flood people, Vishanti? So,
Oh, Roger.
yeah, like Roger from Mud Fossil U. Okay, so let's say I find a building that actually was covered in a mudslide. Therefore, there was a mud flood there, which I guess technically, yeah, there was a local mud flood. It doesn't prove that 200 years ago there was a great reset and the pre-mud flood civilization with all of its amazing technology was covered under hundreds of feet of mud, and we've all been lied to. Because I found a building that was covered by mud at some point. That's not how logic works.
But we also want to examine fossils to see if they truly show that evolution has taken place as they argue. Well, again, remember that the fossil record is one of the main lines of evidentiary supports for the theory of evolution, the theory that organisms have evolved over.
No, it's not. It's supplemental. And I say that as someone who really loves fossils. I don't know if you guys know this. I'm a big fan of fossils, but no, it is not the primary evidence. In fact, if there were no fossils, we could still demonstrate evolution beyond any reasonable doubt.
For long time periods from simple to complex forms.
Okay, that's another thing.
Not correct. I mean, look, I'm not even a biologist, and I can tell you that's just flat wrong.
Yeah, evolution...
They can't comprehend things that don't start out primitive, bad, simple, whatever, and develop into better, good, positive. Like, that's their entire framework. And it's because their theology tells them that the old stuff was primitive and broken and not good enough, but we have a new theology that's better and perfect, and it's going to be even better in the future. So why wouldn't the entire physical world be the same way?
Well, I'm not sure all of them would agree with all of that theology, but some of them certainly would. And here's another thing, like, evolution doesn't push things towards more complexity. But also, it is kind of true that if you look at the entirety of the fossil record, things do get more complex for at least a good portion of it. But that's largely because you're already near the minimum of complexity when you start out. So even if there's no overall trend in evolution, that like the mean complexity is going to have to just go up a little bit if you start against a wall. It's sort of like diffusion, right? So let's say I have a bottle of like a Coke bottle, right? And I have it in an empty room that's just full of air and a lot of CO2 detectors, right? Very sensitive CO2 detectors. And I put the bottle against a wall and I open it. You're going to be able to see CO2 on net flow from where the bottle is towards the other side of the room. But that's not because individual CO2 molecules have a tendency to go to the other side of the room. It's just because they already started at one end. So on net, they're going to tend to go towards the other one. And that's what diffusion is. The same thing happens here. There is no overall trend in evolution for any lineage to become more or less complex. However, when you start at roughly the minimum complexity, well, yeah, things tend to go up a little bit over time on average. We'll hit play.
Well, this, again, argument comes from the fact that fossils are typically found below or above other types of fossils, and that fossils have been sorted in this way. So they say, look, there's different fossils in this layer than the ones above. Life on Earth has changed over time.
I mean, yeah.
Good grief.
Yep, that's true.
But is that enough to prove evolution? No.
By
In fact, there's
itself,
different
no.
Yeah. On its own, no. That is also compatible with things like progressive creationism, like Richard Owen was a fan of. It's not compatible with young Earth creationism and flood geology. So, I mean, it does rule that out. But no, it doesn't necessitate evolution on its own.
Plants and animals in one layer than there are in the layer above it doesn't show evolution. What they must show is an organism in the process of actually evolving.
You know, the
My
funny...
friend, what's this guy's name again?
I don't even remember.
Okay, well, Guy, speaking again as a not biologist, ERVs will clearly tell you about descendancy.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to find every single fossilized example of transitionary forms. Like,
Right.
we literally can sequence genes and determine, oh, these these specimens came from the same tree. It doesn't matter if you found all the examples yet.
Although, interestingly enough, in this image that he's showing us, we do actually have examples here for basically all of these. Like, these bottom two are basically identical, and they're, like, sort of like the osteolipidids. And then, like, you get a little bit higher, and you're getting things like various, like, acanthostegans and ichthyostega and things like that, and, like, Tiktaalik over is probably here, the not quite the top one. And it's like, oh, yeah, is this what we would have to find? Well, good thing we found it then. Like, come on, man.
Ridiculous.
We would have to find all these things we already found. Oh, okay. Sure. I'll buy it.
Boy, have I got news for you.
Right?
The fossil record should be filled with such evolutionary sequences.
Like, literally the ones that you're showing that we already have. Yes, yes.
It should be filled with the fossils that we call intermediate fossils or transitional forms.
Do I need the fossil slideshow? Oh, no, I don't, because the video file I have for it has music that's been starting to get me copyright claimed, because even though I got it from the audio library on YouTube, that doesn't mean anything. Guys, you've probably seen my fossil slideshow. If you haven't, watch a bunch of my backlog videos, because it's in there a whole bunch. Oh my goodness. Yeah, we have a lot of transitional fossils.
In fact, these are glaring.
Is that the one where you got the clip of the yodeling, or is that a different one?
No, that is the yodeling clip, which is in my most recent Thursday video, so the one I did 2 days ago. So yeah, if you want to see it, you can see it with the yodeling background music right on this channel from like 2 days ago. Just go to my channel, sort by recent videos. It was called Pastor Can't Understand Dogs. That's the title of it. It did pretty well, for my channel at least.
absent. But this is what the fossil record must demonstrate for evolution to truly to be true.
No, that's only the case if the fossil record is nearly complete. If it's not, then there's actually not a really great expectation that we should find every transitional form that we would expect would have existed.
An animal in the process of evolving by way of the fossil record.
All animals are in the process of evolving. Well, except the extinct ones, but they were in the process of evolving when they weren't extinct.
Now, it's important to understand that Darwin himself did not invent evolution. He did not invent evolution. There were,
I mean, in the broad sense of the idea that there was some kind of descent with modification. Sorry, descent with modification. Yeah, that's true. He didn't invent it. He was the first person to propose major mechanisms that we now know to be some of the most important aspects of what drives evolution, mainly sexual selection and natural selection. And he was also one of the first people to move away from things like the inheritance of acquired characteristics, like the Lamarckian idea of, like, if you stretch your neck enough, you'll get a longer neck, and then you can pass that down to your offspring. As well as one of the first people to suggest that maybe variation came about naturally as just a result of reproduction. He wasn't sure how that happened. He had some bad and wrong ideas about it, but he was one of the first to suggest these things. So yeah, technically he didn't invent the entire idea.
a lot of evolutionists of Darwin's day, and in fact, much of his views seem to originate from his father. But most...
More grandfather Erasmus,
No.
but okay. Some of his ideas sort of were similar to his grandfather Erasmus Darwin's ideas. Which, yeah, like, and... Like, okay, here's the thing, right? Darwin could be actual Satan. Like, the worst imaginable thing possible, the worst guy, the most unoriginal guy, the stupidest man ever to live. It wouldn't matter. Science is not what it is because Darwin said it should be that way.
The evolution of Darwin's day held to a different mechanism of evolution that they called saltatory evolution.
My goodness. No.
But
Saltatory evolution is the idea that an organism will lay an egg and then a radically different organism will pop out. So like a crocodile will
That
lay an
sounds
egg
fake.
that will hatch a bird. I mean, it doesn't happen, but it was an idea, but it was not the main idea at the time. Lamarckism was far more popular than saltationism at the time.
They believed that that organisms would evolve in rapid jumps. That's
You know, it's weird because I've heard other creationists accuse Stephen Jay Gould, who, you know, lived and died like a century later, of inventing saltationism, but now it apparently predates Darwin? Hey, okay, look, creationists. Go on to, like, World Anvil or something, right? And make your own crazy fantasy setting world with, like, actual lore that you guys can all go back and refer to. Because you're too inconsistent, right? You gotta keep your lore straight. So, I'm gonna suggest a fantasy world building site. Because that's what you're doing. You're doing fantasy world building here. So, why not just go all in? Get a fancy package on World Anvil, then you can keep it all straight among yourselves. It'll be great.
because when they looked around at living populations, they saw
Oh, I'm not sponsored by World Anvil, by the way. Just want to throw it out there. I am not sponsored. I do use the product, though.
distinct groups of organisms, between which there were enormous gaps. I mean, there's a bunch of different kind of reptiles. You got your turtles and tortoises.
Hey, turtles and tortoises. I have a video called Things That Aren't Dinosaurs, Turtles, about the evolution of turtles that includes many transitional turtles. Go check it out.
And you have your snakes, and you have your...
Hey, fun fact, we have transitional snakes that actually have 2 and 4 legs. Modern snakes, some of them still have 2 legs.
lizards.
I actually don't know all that much about the transitional fossils for lizards specifically, so that one I'm not sure about. Maybe we do have a lack of transitional lizard fossils.
But there's no transitional forms between the turtles and the lizards, or
That is a straight up lie. I have videos all about it.
between the lizards and the snakes. So they argued that evolution would occur in rapid jumps, what they called saltatory evolution. And of the animals they knew of in the fossil record, they also knew of only those distinct groups. So this was the reigning.
Vandali 1998 for $2 says, you mean we can't save 10% by putting code Dapper? No. I'll tell you what, if World Anvil wanted to sponsor me, I would probably take that because I do use the product. I do quite like it. And I would ask them to give you guys a discount code by putting in code Dapper at checkout. So, hey, World Anvil, if you're watching, let me know. I'll totally send people your way because, look, I'm not opposed to sponsorships. I'm only opposed to sponsorships for products I don't actually like. So, like, I'm probably not going to ever accept a sponsorship from, like, Raid Shadow Legends. I hate predatory pricing, quote-unquote, free-to-play mobile games. But I really like World Anvil. So, you know.
View of Darwin's day. One of Darwin's big challenges to the evolutionary thinking of his day was that he argued that the process must be slow and gradual.
That's not a big challenge. The challenge was natural selection and a rejection of inheritance of acquired traits. That was the big shakeup. I don't know why we're lying about this, because it doesn't really matter, right? Like, who cares which incorrect idea his idea is overturned? I don't see, like, how it's a rhetorically useful thing to lie about this. Or maybe this guy just really doesn't know. I mean, I guess it's possible.
Attributed it to the same mechanism that was happening in breeding kennels across the country. Darwin himself was an accomplished breeder of pigeons.
That's true.
And he knew well the process that was involved with creating a new pigeon breed from a wild-type pigeon. And
from a wild type, I'm not so sure on that one. I don't think... So it's been a while since I read Origin, which does actually talk a lot about pigeons. I don't remember Charles Darwin having been involved in, like, bringing wild-type pigeons in to create new breeds. I think he was mostly just doing, like, various pigeon fancier crossbreeds between various established domesticated groups. But maybe I'm wrong on that. If anyone is, in fact, a Darwin biographer, let me know.
Nor horse breeds or dog breeds or cat breeds. These breeding histories are well known, and Darwin himself published on the breeding history of pigeons in one of his books.
Mm-hmm.
But he attributed this artificial.
By the way, Kent Hovind should watch this because Kent Hovind is still telling people that Darwin hated birds because he loved worms, and that's why he shot so many birds. Which, no, Darwin quite liked birds. He kept many of them as pets, and also he shot birds because that's how you collect specimens. Right? If you want to tell people, hey, I totally saw this bird, your source can't just be, trust me, bro, I wrote it down. You have to produce the bird. Silver Harlow says, for $2, punctuated equilibrium does not equal saltatory evolution. Correct. But now we're going, like, the thing is, Silver, this guy is saying that saltatory evolution was, like, the pre-Darwinian notion, which, I don't even know. DM Wayne for $5 says, but I thought Darwin hated birds because he loved worms. Ken said so. Exactly. Exactly.
Artificial selection process that's happening in these breeding colonies by people to nature, and he called it natural selection. Well, if natural selection is the mechanism that's responsible for these changes, then it has to be slow and gradual and occur over long periods of time.
Okay, so that's going to be a relative thing, right? So it's going to be slow on the time frame of, like, a human lifetime, but when, you know, a relatively thin cross-section of rock can be a whole million years, what counts as slow starts to change. And I noticed this with, say, like, Maddie, right? So Maddie does, she does, like, atmospheric science, climate science stuff. So for her, a long time is, like, a few decades. For me, who does a lot of stuff about, like, paleontology and geology and things like that, you know, 5 million years is a relatively short time. So that's one of the things about different kinds of sciences like this, is what counts as the short term versus the long term really changes depending on what kind of science you're doing. So it is true that on the scale of, say, like, a human timeline, yes, evolution is always fairly slow. But that being said, you know, humans can watch speciation happen within a single human lifetime. We can watch things like mice get different colored coats, different tail lengths, things like that within a human lifetime, really a few decades. But yeah, if you want to go from, say, relatively basal toxicophoran lizards all the way to, say, modern snakes, that's going to take a few million years at least.
what he argued, that it's slow and gradual. But in the Origin of Species, he actually gives a carefully worded apology that he can't point to the fossils to prove his theory true. Of the fossils that they knew at that time, they were basically the same as the animals that were alive then.
Oh my goodness, no.
I think not.
This had been a previous generation worth of discovery, was that ancient life on the planet was radically different, that there were things that just did not exist today. For instance, mosasaurs have been discovered. Lizards the size of whales living in the ocean. And everyone knew, if these guys were still out there, I mean, at this point, people had sailed in basically every ocean, right? It was the first time that you could say that you could find people in one society, you could find someone who'd been to any given bit of water. First time in human history you could say that about any society. And it was largely the Europeans who were the first people to do this. You could find a European who had been all over the Indian Ocean. You could find one who'd been all over the Caribbean, the Atlantic, the Pacific, all of these places. No one had ever found a whale-sized lizard. So, or they had found, pterosaurs. These weird, sort of vaguely bat-like reptilian creatures. And people knew, hey, if these are things that are flying all over the place, we should have found them by now. Because this was the very beginning of the idea of a global society, where society could actually encounter things from anywhere in the world. And no one was finding these things. And this was, a generation before Darwin. It was realized at that point, hey, past life was radically different from what it's like now. There needs to be an explanation for this. That's why we had things like Lamarckism and progressive creation, because this was something that needed to be explained. It was not the case that all the fossils known in Darwin's day were just modern animals. Not even close. Yeah, where's my mouse? There it is.
Well, he argued that these groups of animals were created by extinctions. That the reason where we just...
What? No. Extinction doesn't create groups of animals. What does that even mean? I mean,
How does stuff dying out create new ones?
In the long run, it opens up new niches for adaptive radiation, but that's the evolution part. The extinction on its own doesn't just create new organisms. I'm getting an actual headache from this guy. This guy is way worse than I was expecting.
Just had turtles alive and reptiles alive and snakes alive was that
those are all reptiles, dude.
Transitional forms between those groups had died due to extinction. But he predicted that...
What? Okay, I'm gonna go back a few seconds and listen to that whole thing in a row. Maybe the interruption is making it make less sense to me. So we're gonna see what happens.
Of the fossils that they knew at that time, they were basically the same as the animals that were alive then. Well, he argued that these groups of animals were created by extinctions. That the reason where we just had turtles alive and reptiles alive and snakes alive was that the transitional forms between those groups had died due to extinction.
Okay, I get what he's saying now. He's saying that the distinctiveness that is apparent, or seemed apparent at the time, was created because transitional forms happened to go extinct, leaving behind what appeared to be distinct taxonomic groupings. Okay, that at least is a coherent thing to think. But the thing is that transitional fossils were found a couple years after the initial publishing of Darwin's Origin of Species. In fact, if you go through the passage that he's talking about, creationists always quote the first printing version of that passage. But if you read subsequent editions, it gets more and more confident about the fossil record as time goes, because guess what? Fossils matching Darwin's predictions were being found. So, yeah, it's in the first printing of Darwin's Origin of Species, yeah, he was pretty circumspect. But that changes.
But he predicted that although he could not point to the fossils during his day, that the fossils did exist and would be found. The question is how.
And then he was proven to be right before he died, which is why he changed that passage in later editions, you dumbass. I really don't like this guy.
have they been found? Can they connect together these various types of animals or plants by way of transitional forms?
In many cases, yes. Not in all, because the fossil record isn't perfect. We're never going to have every organism that ever lived. So there will always be quote-unquote gaps. But the fact that any of them have been filled is a confirmed prediction of evolution, and every new one that gets filled is yet another confirmation of evolution. Let's see. Digital Demonic Davros says for $5 reduce. I guess these fundamentalist people don't like Australian fossil record. Yeah, that's another thing. Australia has very smooth transitions among many of the animals. It has really great transitions for a lot of the marsupial groups there. So, yeah. Australia's cool. Now, I'm going to be a little bit fair and say that Australian paleontology is relatively young compared to European and North American paleontology. Part of that is just like the harshness of the terrain. It's not always easy to get to all the places in Australia you want to get to. Because like Australia is really rough. It's never been a place with lots of people for good reason. It is it's tough to live in. Especially, you know, pre-modern technology levels. So that's one of the reasons there. But given that, you know, creationists tend to be at least 60 or so years out of date on almost everything, I guess that's probably why. They probably have not quite yet caught up to the fact that we actually have some really cool fossils from Australia. And Glarn Budin, that's RN. I thought maybe it was Glam, sorry. Look, the internet needs a better, like, the world needs better fonts for distinguishing RN from M. I hate that. Anyway, Glarn Budin for $5 says, remember, this is a cult at its core. Primary way to make sure your cultists stay brainwashed, make opposition seem absurd, so they avoid the truth. I mean, I'm not willing to say that young Earth creationism on its own is a cult, but it is a characteristic belief of many organizations that I would consider to be cults. And all of the organizations that teach it also engage in cult-like practices that I think should be worrying to anyone.
And another issue with that is that it's easy for them to sell themselves because they're selling you certainty. And they don't like the fact that science is constantly developing and refining itself, which is inherently full of uncertainty. So, like, you hear them say clown stuff like, well, science was wrong before, how can you trust them? Like,
Science is a
listen, man,
liar sometimes.
like, you need to get this through your head that you can sell certainty, but you're gonna be incorrect.
Yep. Look, if you want a great and humorous summation of almost every young Earth creationist argument ever, I suggest that you look up the episode of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, where they're trying to decide who's liable for the damages to a car as a result of a car crash, where it comes out that for some reason one of them is a character witness. Like, the whole thing is insane. But at one point, they decide that one guy isn't reliable or trustworthy because he doesn't believe in evolution. He's a creationist. So he goes into the back, and then hours later he comes back out with a, here's why evolution is nonsense. And his entire argument is, science is a liar sometimes. And what he means is some scientists got things wrong. So he goes through this history of, like, Galileo Galilei thought this was the case, but then he was wrong about these things, making him and everyone else on Earth look like a bitch. And he just goes through several scientists, and he's like, see, how can you trust science? Like, that's the whole argument. It's like, yeah, science has gotten it wrong sometimes. But you know what it does when it finds out that that's the case? It corrects itself. Yeah. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that not all the religions, not even all the versions of Christianity could be true at the same time, right? I'm pretty sure this guy knows it, right? Because he's not just probably a generic, I'm a kind of a Christian, whatever. He probably belongs to, like, a Protestant church. He probably thinks that the Catholics are wrong, that they say the Eastern Orthodox are wrong, and that the Anabaptists are wrong, right? But you notice that none of those groups ever decide to change that. That's because when it turns out that a religion is wrong, it doesn't change anything, really. Now, in many cases, those might be minor differences, and he might think that too. In which case, you know, whatever. Like, I'm not here to tell people what the one true faith is or whether or not there is one. But, like, it is a fact that religions are loath to correct themselves in a way that science is not. So, here we go.
Well, the answer to that is no. They've been searching for 150 years to fill in these
And have
gaps
found lots of examples.
Yep.
by way of fossil forms, and they have not found them.
All right. Well, that's
Incorrect.
incorrect. Well, we're going to wrap it up there. Vishanti, what do you have coming up on your channel?
What channel?
There you go. I'm telling.
I
Look,
mean,
I know you've been
it's
working on it.
I know I have been working on it. Life happens,
Mhm.
and lately a lot of things have been happening a lot. So when it's done, you'll know. Until then,
You'll know because I'll
stay
tell you.
tuned.
All right. Well, on this channel, let's see what we got coming up. So today is the 2nd. On the 5th, there's going to be a new Kent with Bent. On the 7th, we're going to be getting the second part of that talk by the pastor that we did the first video on a couple days ago. Then on the 9th, I'm not sure. It might be another one of these. I also might end up having a Leaving Young Earth Creationism. Got to figure out that. That's as far ahead as really as I'm going to look. If you guys want, there's still like 2.5 months worth of videos that are waiting to be released that you guys can have access to if you join the Patreon or the channel membership program. The Patreon is linked in the description. Channel membership is right below this video. It really helps because every little bit helps. The channel is always on the knife's edge of possibly going into the red, at which point, if it stayed there, I would probably have to scale back. And I don't want to do that. I like giving you guys pretty often, almost always, 3 videos a week, and pretty much guaranteed at least 2. So if you guys want to help support that, then do that. And if you can't, look, share this video, hit like, leaving comments. You guys know the drill. Do all the YouTube stuff. In fact, to hammer that home, here's my outro that's going to say all that stuff again. Bye, everybody. Thanks for watching, but before you go, I just want to say a special thank you to my channel members and my patrons, especially those pledging $20 or above. Work in Progress, Benthoven, Cynically Skeptic, Denny5252, Ian Chen, John Ackerman, Chris Love, Landon Knoll, Yapetus, Mabbity Babbity, Sphincter of Doom, The Venerable Bede, and Patrick Dennis. As you probably know, YouTube is a very volatile platform, and from month to month my income on the channel can swing wildly. But the people you see on screen are directly supporting so that I don't have to worry too much about that, and the channel can keep going as it is, and perhaps even improving. If you'd like to join this team, there are links below to join the channel or in the description to join the Patreon. The Patreon starts as low as $1 a month, and the channel memberships start as low as $1.99 a month. On Patreon, you can even get a discount for pledging annually. If you do decide to pledge, you'll get access to an exclusive Discord server just for channel supporters, as well as early access to all of my pre-recorded videos, often up to 2 months in advance. Higher tiers will unlock even better perks. Now, if an annual or monthly pledge isn't right for you, but you still want to support the channel, there is a merch store down in the description, as well as an Amazon wishlist, just for me. And if financial support isn't something you can or want to do, then if you still want to help out the channel, please just like and share these videos and make sure you comment on them. It really helps the channel out. Thanks again for watching.